if you want to try and break silos, you have to really understand what it is you're breaking, because you don't want to break something and have the rubble that's coming out fall on someone and potentially have unintended consequences. Because then that's a lot of things that you have to think about. So I think crash through it, but just take measured risks and understand what your risks are.
Welcome to Breaking Silos, the show where we inform you how to break silos and why it actually matters. My name is Doris Carini, and I'm the co-host of today's show, as well as the Europe ambassador of the East-West Center, XPD. XPD stands for Experiential Professional Development. This Breaking Silos collective show is a very special one. It is produced in collaboration with the East-West Center, and we are interviewing 15 fellows of the East-West Center 2021 Innovation for Sustainable Development Program. Today we have Mr. Dzaim Dzulkifli on the show. He will tell us about his project Demi Laut. He is located in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and the aim of their project is to modernize traditional fisheries. Thank you for being on the show, Dzaim. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Dzaim. I'm a marine biologist by training, but during the pandemic, it was kind of tough to find some work to do. So I ended up picking up product management as well along the side. So after that, I was kind of thinking, how can I combine these two things that I enjoy doing and really get the experience that I wanted out? And so that's how I joined Demi Laut. So they were looking for someone with a science background, and it just so happened that I also had that product background. So now I'm back here in Malaysia after coming back from the UK. I'm pretty happy to be here.
Great. And we are very excited to have you on this show to learn about the innovation strategies that you and your team are applying to actually break silos in your communities, mostly in the fishing communities, because the aim of your project, as I understood, is to really transform traditional fishers into modern bankable entrepreneurs, as well as scientists, citizen scientists. And you want the fishers to collect data via IoT on the environmental information of the sea. Can you tell us a little bit more how that works, or how that digitalization works for the traditional fishing communities?
Yeah, so currently in the traditional fisher communities or artisanal fisher communities, we tend to see that there's a lack of ICT. So like there's no communication throughout the entire supply chain. And also there seems to be a lack of technology that we have. So these innovations that we've developed and also that we plan to develop are all surrounded about increasing their market access. So the way that fisheries works, or at least traditional fisheries works in Malaysia, is it goes by from the fisher, it goes to a middleman, and the middleman will then sell it on to other people like retailers, distributors, or even processors. But at the end of the day, we've come across some data that shows that these fishers are losing about 100% to 300% of their money. I mean, sorry, not their money, but the profits. There's a massive difference between the end retailer and the fishers. So we're trying to close that gap and make it transparent. So by incorporating IoT, they can start to communicate with the market itself directly and know which fish are in need, for example, or they can even help them with communicating with retailers so they can sell directly. And that's all part of that increasing market access. In terms of citizen science, there's a distinct lack of research and of the conditions of the sea. So understanding how currents move around the ocean near us, that can really help us in terms of like fisheries studies. And these studies are important because if you don't understand the context of which all these fish shellfish all inhabit, then you can't really make a big, wide study on their conditions. And ultimately, it's context that we're trying to find with that.
So you're basically saying that the traditional fishers are now turned into team members of your project, right? Because they're helping with the research and provide that important information.
Exactly.
That's great. I think that was also one of the questions one of the fellows of the cohort asked, Delger from Mongolia. She was curious to exactly know how the digital trade works. And another similar question was from Khalid from Bangladesh, who wanted to know what strategies you and your team actually followed to incorporate and mainstream the digital technology among the fishing communities. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we believe in grassroots solutions, right? So we went to ground and decided that working with the fishers to understand their pain points and to work to solve them using our expertise, that was the best way we could do it. We tried the top to bottom approach, but it seemed like there was a bit of pushback. So we decided to flip it over and go from the bottom up. So we spoke to them, we spoke to a couple of fishers, and we identified their pain points. And I think that was the best way we could possibly have done it, because who knows your problems other than you, right? So we developed, for example, the digital marketplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also microfinancing. So we would speak to them and we'd see, okay, they have a lack of records, so they need a way to track their records and eventually become bankable fishers. And we came up with this solution where we'd be able to track them using an app. And then we came with that concept to banks to see if there was interest from them. And then also, since those two are quite closely tied together, we'd also work in stages so as not to overload them with information, which can be discouraging for anyone, right? So we would also provide seminars and teach them and provide classes to make sure that they understand the tools and how they can help them and how they can use that in the future.
How many fishers do you currently have working with the application on the phones and also for the overall program?
So currently, that's still in the proof of concept. So we have developed the systems that we would need, and also we put in work in order to bring that to people to start pitching to it. So we're currently working on that, and it's looking quite promising. A couple of banks have come back to us and saying that they're interested. They just need to iron out the details, since money is something that's quite important, and so people want to make sure that all their due diligence is done for that.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a number of fishers? Like how many are using it?
Currently, we have products that are out. So we have not this particular product out right now, but we've got the Pumakat No, which is a net hauling device. We have 30 fishers who have received a net hauling device, and then one more who is our role model, who's going to receive the device and also champion our cause with another project that we have, the cold packs.
Great. So you said you have one role model that you use. How did you figure that out, that it's important to have such a person, such a figure?
Yeah, at the end of the day, these communities are really tight-knit, right? They live in the same area. They all have the same, mostly work in fisheries, but then also they have families that are working in that community. So it's really tight-knit. And breaking through that as someone who's not from the area, there's little cultural things that you might miss and not pick up on. So it's important to have someone. It doesn't have to be a high-level person within the community, but it could be anyone, right? And having that person to just lighten the blow, because it might seem like we're coming in just for our own purposes, but we're a social enterprise. So social impact is our goal. And sometimes having that communication and changing the way people perceive us and also our solutions, we don't want to seem like we're coming in and intruding on their space.
Yeah, I think that just proves the concept of word of mouth, that we trust a friend or a community member more than some advertisement or something we read or see somehow. That's great that you guys are applying that and see that it really works. And you mentioned, Dzaim, that first you had a top-down strategy, but then you shifted to a bottom-up. How long did it take you as a team to realize we need to shift?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there was talk about. I think so. Hazik has been working in fisheries for about 5 years after he first developed the Pumukat No with a family friend of his, Pachik No, another fisherman. And after that was done, I think we went to the government, and then there was a bit of pushback. So we decided, I think maybe 2 years or 3 years, and then that's when that shift came about. And so I came after that shift. So I've always been about the grassroots and going directly to the ground.
Yeah, it seems like it sometimes takes time to see if something works out. And then I'm really happy to hear that your team was open to shift and say, we need to change, we need to apply a new strategy. That's great. Dzaim, you mentioned just briefly that you talk to banks and that the fishers should actually be able to get microloans. That was also a question from one co-fellow, Dzulkifli from Indonesia. She would like to know what are some of the criteria for fishers to be able to get microloans?
Yeah, so as I said before, they have a lack of sales records, right? And this means that there's no formal record that people can access and make sure that it's transparent. There's no messing about, or there's no cooking up with the books, right? So when we saw that, we decided, okay, we need an app to be able to address that issue. But then also there's another part where they need collateral, right? Because putting those loans in there and not expecting anything in return, that's just a really dangerous way of just getting free money. So when we realized that fishers could not afford some of our products because they were too expensive and their margins were just not enough for them to reach our prices, that's when we realized that we could provide one of our products as collateral. It would incentivize them to work and be able to pay off that loan, but then also providing them with outside value, that they would see it as something that was useful to them, that they would want to have, and also help them in the future to be eligible for these loans.
That's great. And you said you currently already work with 2 banks?
Yes, 2 banks.
And besides the banks, who else would you see as a key driver or key player in this entire strategy that you're applying?
Yes, there's quite a few actually. So we've realized that our expertise is good, coming from like scientists and engineers as a multidisciplinary team, but then we realized we needed a bit more power, like a lot more knowledge. So we've started to engage with universities like UKM and UniKL, so policymakers and also people in extremely technical backgrounds to help advise us on things, because we don't know everything at the end of the day, but we can get a little help from our friends every now and then.
Yeah, it seems like it takes a whole village to make such a big move. And
it really does.
Khalid, for example, but also Dzulkifli from Indonesia, Khalid from Bangladesh, they both wanted to know, what do you think were your local and also national challenges that you faced when you implemented your project?
Yeah, so traditional fisheries in Malaysia is quite a green field. And as far as we know, we're the only ones that are currently working in that field. And so when it comes to an area which is fresh in social innovation, we have big people who've been around for a long time coming to us and saying, why do you think this is the correct market for you? This seems kind of strange, right? So the challenges come in convincing people that there is a potential market. We've had a couple people come to us and tell us that we're in the wrong market. If your customers can't be sold, then why are you choosing them? But they're not our customers, they're our beneficiaries, right? So at the end of the day, someone else would be potentially investing into us, providing us with resources and the income that we need to be able to provide these free benefits to our beneficiaries. So it's really convincing people that our products and also our values are aligned, and also aligned to the fishers. Because there's always that case where if there's that mismatch, then all this work would have been for nothing, and all this investment would have been for nothing.
Mm-hmm. And have you also noticed at first when you introduced that project and the different products that you actually offer, have you noticed some pushback from the fishermen themselves or the fishers themselves?
Yeah, we have noticed some pushback. I think it's mostly due to, it's like a double-edged sword. So like, there are people who may not see this straight away, and then there's also the people who are just right on board, right? So
Mm-hmm.
trying to manage that. And so the way that we think about it is that the social innovation part that comes in is that how do we keep that from going out of control and there being this big like struggle and fight just to get our products on the ground. So the social innovation part is about trying to align our products and our solutions with values. Like, for example, we spoke to fishers and they realized that they didn't have the manpower necessary because of the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, or because there's a lack of workforce on the ground. So that Pumukat No was developed so that one person could operate the net and it wouldn't be such a burden on their hands. And also extremely tiring because they're doing this for 4 hours a day, sometimes 2 separate parts, right? And then another example would be for the cold chain. So we spoke to our fishers that we were working with, and we saw that they had no they had no like cold chain. So they were struggling to keep their fish fresh and make sure that the fish would get to the shore at peak condition. But because of the crazy costs of fishing, especially of owning ice in Sarawak, they didn't always consider investing into it. And because of that, they don't have fresh fish by the end of the day. They have spoiled fish that isn't always able to sell because nobody wants to buy fresh fish. So the value there for our cold chain was that we can have this for you here. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to rent. You don't have to like go crazy and buy ice every single time, which is extremely expensive and would hurt your margins. But you can rent it instead. It's reusable. So there's an environmental factor to that. And then eventually you'll get those returns back for yourself, and also we will.
That sounds like there was a lot of education or information involved for your team. How did you go about that? What was your strategy to really get that information, that value that comes with your products into your fisher's mind and understanding?
Yeah, so I think that point, it just like a big shout out to our ground team. So we have a ground team out in Sarawak who speak Bahasa Sarawak, which is different from Bahasa Malaysia. And they also work closely with us through video calls and conferences just to understand where we're coming from. Because as scientists and engineers, sometimes we don't really play nice with people. We don't when they don't understand what we're saying, it kind of gets us frustrated. So putting that and having we think about it, we design think all of our processes. So we speak a lot and we try to empathize. So that empathetical approach would carry on through that from us into the ground team and to the fishers. And they've also developed really strong ties, especially with our role model. Like they speak to him quite often and make sure that he understands it, because we don't want him to feel like he's at a loss for working with us, and also that he's not going to be able to deliver what he wants. Like, we understand that, and it's perfectly natural.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you're making, because after all, your fishers, they're really good at fishing, right? They might not want to use the technology or spend all their days now on a phone or on an application. So that was actually a nice question that Delger from Mongolia also wanted to know. She wanted to know how the digital trade or all the technologies that you're applying, to her it sounds like really good and helpful to improve the fishing industry, but what do you see as a potential risk? And how could it affect or impact the traditional fishers, you know? Like, do you think that the technology could take away from their everyday work that they're really good at?
Yeah.
Is there any risk that comes with that, or that you guys see coming?
Yeah. So this is something that we've thought about a lot, actually. And at the end of the day, the fishers like want to go fishing, right? And if you ask any of them, they'll be like, "Oh, I love the sea. That's why I go out every day." And it's important, for example, with the tracking and traceability for fisher safety, right? It's if you misgovern it, then there's a chance that your human rights and your freedoms and your liabilities on the line. And if we didn't consider these concerns, then we would just not be doing good work. If we were to start too late, like if we wait down the line and bring this up later, then we probably wouldn't have time to properly think about this and how it would be. So the fishers may be liable for the things that they're doing themselves. And we've placed a big importance on educating and on making them understand the knowledge of their liability. And it would be influencing rather than penalizing. So we wouldn't want to just outright tell them, if you, for example, catch a fish that's not a target species, which is considered bycatch, that you won't get penalized for it. Like you won't get, oh, we'll take away any of the benefits that we may have provided to you. No. It's about making sure they understand that bycatch is bad. Why is that bad? And then what steps can we do forward? So really, we aren't changing the way they're living. It's more like aiding them in their lifestyle. Like what will be the next evolution from that point on?
Yeah. So kind of really using technology to help make their everyday life easier, but not trying to change their fishing patterns. I mean, change it to the better, but not changing what they're doing every day. Okay, that's great. It seems like your team really has a very open approach towards making mistakes or failures. Can you talk a little bit more how your team developed that culture?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I joined the team about 3 or 4 months ago. And of course, it was a new team. I was always worried that I might do something wrong, right? But that slowly eased away as I started to realize that managing risks is important and proper planning. So everything that we do, there's a process to it. So we take, okay, what's our scope? What's our objectives? And then how do we there's an initial stage of planning, and then we come back and we validate it. Make sure that does anybody have any concerns? It's really all about discussion. We're always speaking to each other. Even if we're not in the office, our group chat is just jumping up with messages. And then even on a weekend, sometimes I get a message, and I'm like, it's a comforting environment to know that even if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
like there's ways to manage it.
That's a really interesting to hear. Also, how you just say, like, it's all about discussion, right? There will always be something coming up, but we discuss it openly.
Of course.
That's a great approach. And you mentioned earlier that the team on the ground that goes out into the communities and does speak the community language is the one you really want to thank. Are these volunteers or are these team members? And if so, one question was also from Zulkifli from Indonesia, a co-fellow. She would like to know how you keep volunteers happy and engaged in your program, or that team on the ground. What are those strategies that you guys apply?
Yeah. So the team on the ground, they're members of the team. They're not volunteers. They're vocational students from the vocational school in Sarawak. They're graduates. So they met Hazik during their course. So then they came onto the team as something that would be interesting for them to do, and also to learn like what's it like in the industry, right?
Do you guys have volunteers? If so, how do you recruit them, and how do you keep your volunteers happy and engaged?
So currently we don't have any volunteers. We just have people who are interns slash on the team, like me, and also the core team. But we'd like to start to get volunteers in. So the main people that we're targeting are university students and school students aren't currently working, and they're trying to get their foot into the door into the industry. And because of that, they have an interest, right, in social innovation. That's what we're all about. And also maybe they might not be the people who are fit for the job. For example, like they might not be a social scientist, but an engineer can still learn to do the things that a social scientist can do. So working with that, it would have to be something that allows them to grow with us, right? Because as someone who was at the start was just focused on fish, that was all I knew about. And then eventually got into product management. I kind of wanted to see what kind of skills I could get. And then being in this culture right now at Demi Laut, it means that I can grow, I can choose what subjects I want to learn about. And even if I'm completely new at it, I have no experience, there's still that space for me to learn. And that's something that we want to give to our volunteers. So they have the freedom of choice of, let's say, one day they decide that they want to look into marketing, for example.
Mhm.
They have the choice, and also the people around them that can help support them to be able to have that experience, learn from it, and test the waters a little bit.
Mhm. Earlier, you mentioned that, of course, there's always risks that come with such a project, or in the sense of maybe fishing or bycatch, there's some mistakes that are being done. How do you overall manage the risk mechanism for your project? That was also a question from our co-fellow Oka from Myanmar.
Yeah. So those risks that we see, it's something that we come up, or we try to see before they come up, right? Because if you prepare for the risks, then you won't be surprised. But sometimes something comes up that you don't always foresee. And in terms of our projects, we always try to look forward instead of looking back. We can't change the past, so we have to look forward. And seeing those risks come up means that it doesn't mean that something necessarily has gone wrong, but it's something that we need to help manage. So again, the discussion point comes up. Anything that comes up, you bring it up to the team. We'll have a little meeting, and we'll discuss what possible next steps that can come from that.
Mhm. Another question from Oka from Myanmar was, how do you do the measurement and evaluation of your project?
Yeah. So when we're measuring our projects, it's about social impact first, and then profits second. But I don't think it's profits, but it's more for like all things that we do is for social impact. So when we first decided on, for example, the creating bankable fishers, we wanted to address something that would help the fishers now, but then also and provide them value in the moment, but then also help them in the future. So being able to measure that by saying, for example, we have impacted 40 fishers. They are now eligible for microloans, which allows them to invest into their business and create new opportunities for them down the line. It's just something that's important to us because these fishers have been overlooked largely. They're all marginalized in B40 communities, and that means that they don't have the help to be able to make it up or to be able to improve their lives. And I think something that's interesting is that there was a study that was done, and it showed that all the fishers within some of the communities that we work in are living on subsistence. So they're fishing for subsistence rather than for sale. So they don't have access to the food that they need to be able to survive. So they rely on their fishing. And but due to that, and due to other factors like trawlers and also overfishing, they're all living in an area that's degraded. So if they don't have other sources of income, then they won't be able to get the food they need on the table for their families and their children. So it's about addressing problems like that that we see that maybe aren't super clear currently, but will eventually become a problem in the future.
Mm-hmm. Is your team using a certain tool or any certain platforms or technology to actually measure the evaluation process? Or how are you documenting?
So we have KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
We also have our MEL, which we use to determine what our positive outcomes will be. And also we've had a little think about some unintended outcomes. And I think those tools are probably the best things that we would have and those are tools that we create based on a project per project basis, and also for people as well, because sometimes someone's KPI might be different, for example. But the MEL definitely is like a encompassing thing for the two projects that we have written it up for.
Yeah. So MEL, just for our viewers who are not familiar with it, can you explain a little bit more, Dzaim, what it stands for?
Monitoring, evaluation, and learning, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Another question that is kind of related to that measurement and monitoring and learning approach that you discussed was from Khalid from Bangladesh, who was curious to learn about the sustainability of the project after phase out or completion. Do you already have any results to present, or how sustainable do you actually think your project is?
Yeah. So the Demi Laut project, I believe, is quite sustainable because our aim is to empower fishers to be sustainable fishers and also empower and uplift them with the skills and technologies they need. So after the project, they'll have a product helping them alleviate some of the problems that they're having currently, like, for example, lack of cold chain or lack of manpower, as I said before. But then we also believe that they'll want to continue working with this on the digital marketplace, for example, and then also as citizen scientists. And there's plans for that citizen scientist as a method of potential income because there's a need for data. And the more data you have, the better your studies can be and the more contextual they can be. And with that in mind, then it would be something that they would carry on continuing doing and something that would help them after a particular project is done. And I think that sustainability is something that we want. We don't want just a stopgap solution that ends with us providing it them. We want to follow them. We want to see how they grow, see how they react, because they have all these new tools, and it's something that we're interested in because we are invested in their plight.
Yeah, that investment seems to be a real important base from where you do all your work. You've mentioned it several times. What I'm really curious about is how COVID impacted your entire project, and also vice versa. What can your project and your innovation method that you're applying actually help with, or how does it link to the COVID situation?
Yeah, COVID has impacted us all. It's not only impacted us, but it's also impacted the fishers. With lockdowns rolling across Malaysia, it's tough for them to be able to go out to sea. And as I said before, some of them are living on 100% subsistence, so they need to go out to sea in order to put food on the table. And with us, we've been working trying to get these projects on the ground that we have. We've crowdfunded 2 of our projects in the past, but then due to the pandemic, we've had to shut down. The villages that we worked in are just completely roadblocked, so we can't get through. So working on the ground is something that's really important to us because at the end, we're on the ground, we're a grassroots solution business, right? But that's not it might have put a pause on everything, but that's not the only thing that we've been doing. So we're trying to work on our business development. So we're currently in the Gap Magic program, which is an accelerator for startups. We've also been part of the Google mentorships. So we have mentors and people that we can speak to from Google who are able to advise us on on things that may change or things that we may have roadblocks for. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And we've also just been talking to each other, trying to make sure that we're still a team. We're not working in these silos that prevent us from sharing information between each other. So communication is key, and then also making sure that we follow through with our promises once the COVID pandemic is over.
Yeah. You mentioned it just right now that you're hoping not to fall into any silos with your team members. How would you say, beyond what you just mentioned, are you breaking silos with the work that you're doing? Or can you give us some advice how others could also break silos for sustainable development?
Yeah, I think we're breaking silos in the way that we're just trying to break the disconnect between the fishers and the bodies that are working outside of their communities, right? We're trying to bring in universities to try and help them to develop technologies and also policies that would help the fishers to start thriving. We're also bringing in scientists and engineers who don't always usually work together into one thing to help us create something new and something fresh that really helps them. And I think if you want to try and break silos, you have to really understand what it is you're breaking, because you don't want to break something and have the rubble that's coming out fall on someone and potentially have unintended consequences. Because then that's a lot of things that you have to think about. So I think crash through it, but just take measured risks and understand what your risks are.
Dzaim, is there anything else that you would tell our viewers at the end of this kind of conversation? What should they take away from Demi Laut and your impact that you're creating?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we're a social enterprise. We want to do social good. And if you take one thing away from us, is that we're a team. We want to help, and we invite you to speak to any of us. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to us on Facebook as well. Or you can link up with any one of us on LinkedIn or Facebook as well. We're there. We're happy to speak to you if you have any opportunities that you'd like to explore.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really had a wonderful time learning about how you're breaking silos to modernize traditional fisheries in your communities. I hope this was insightful to our viewers as well. I'm very happy to share any links below in the description box, how to find out about Dzaim's work and Demi Laut's website and so on. And of course, if you like this episode, please give us a thumbs up and feel free to share it with your friends and communities. We always want to share and spread the good work that our fellows are doing. Also, please subscribe to our channel. As I mentioned, there will be another 14 interviews coming up with the Innovation Fellows of the East-West Center's 2021 Development Program. And we have fellows from all over the world who are doing amazing work, such as Dzaim in the fields of environment, but also arts, education, health, and resilience management. From me and Dzaim, we say thank you for being here with us today, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.